All right, welcome back to the Off the Line Performance YouTube channel. Today is episode 2 of assembling the long block and the motor for this 07 STI that we're putting together. We're gonna start off with the engine upside down. We're gonna get the oil cooler bolted on. We're gonna bolt the header on. And then by the end of this video, we should have a pretty sick looking engine with a turbo, intake manifold and some other stuff. So I'm just gonna get into putting some stuff on. Like I said, we're gonna start with the Perrin oil cooler sandwich plate. Okay, first things first, we're gonna get a little bit of red Loctite and we're gonna put it on the threads of this oil cooler adapter. All right, we'll get that threaded in. I got the wrong size here, let me get it 24. Well, I had a 24 mil socket. Where it went is another question, apparently. All right, we're gonna get this adapter torqued down nice and tight, and we do have red Loctite on there, so we don't have it coming loose. Then we are going to do the same thing on the inner threads here of this side, because we don't want any of this stuff going loose and losing oil pressure. Snake that down in and get that nice and tight. All right, got that on. Now I need a oil filter, which is right here. Okay, first really cool part we got here, ETS MaxFlow V2 header. These are one of the best headers on the market, if not, I dare say, the best header on the market. They flow phenomenally. We have made an astronomical amount of horsepower with them, and we haven't seen a failure yet. So that's why we keep pushing them. So I got the new gaskets on there. We got the header on. Thankfully, since we did a 2-port water pump earlier in the previous video, we don't have to worry about this cooling line that normally comes across here. It's just not going to be there at all. So it's less failure point and a little bit of simplification on the build. It's snug. I actually need to switch to a deep socket. These ETS headers are available on our website. You can get them with the V-band configuration like this one has, or you can also get it with a 2-bolt flange that will match to a standard up pipe. So if you're using a factory up pipe or a aftermarket one, you can use the ETS header. And honestly, that's really about all we have to do on the bottom side of the engine, since we need to put the engine mounts on, which I'll do next. But like I said, getting rid of that water pump cooling line that transfers coolant over to the factory oil cooler, if you get rid of that, it simplifies a lot of things and a lot of failure points on these engines. All right, now we'll get our engine mounts. We're just using a stock engine mount on this. We don't need to put anything crazy, any solid mount or something like that, because while this car is going to make a lot of horsepower, we don't want it to be too uncomfortable. There we go. Okay. All right, we got that done. Now we can grab the up pipe and get that put on. The benefits to V-band are you don't need a gasket. And if it leaks, you just tighten it up a little bit. So I like V-band. On my personal cars, I try to use V-band as much as I can, just because it really does simplify a lot of things. And it just makes things a lot easier to work on as well. Because I'm not fighting lining up a 2-volt flange. I'm not fighting if the gasket's gonna seal, if everything's sitting on there perfectly, just go like that, and now it's tight. And it doesn't move anymore now too. So I can move this around and it's on there solid. So let's flip it back over and throw the intake manifold on. So this is the intake manifold we have picked out for this car. This is from Corsa Veloce and is a billet intake manifold, and man, look at that. So a lot of people wonder what the difference is between this intake manifold and the Process West manifold. You could fact check me here, But it is my understanding that the owner of Corsa Veloce did the design for Process West and sold the rights to them. And when that contract expired, he started making them on his own. So that's the brand that Corsa Veloce is. The other big difference, and the reason that I tend to sway people more towards Corsa Veloce ones, I like their logo here in the corner a little bit better. It's more simple, it's clean. And also, if you look on the underside of the intake manifold, you'll see you have all these NPT threads, so National Pipe Thread. The Corsa Veloce ones use British Standard Pipe Thread. So it's kind of tricky to find fittings for it in the US, at least local, and especially if you're like at the racetrack and you need a fitting or have to replace a fitting, it's going to be a lot easier to find an NPT pipe thread fitting than a British Standard pipe thread. So other than that, I'm pretty sure they flow just about the exact same. It basically just breaks down to convenience for me. And yeah, I just like the look of this one better too. So I need to go grab a couple fittings that we can put into the bottom of this. And then we will bolt it down and lay our hoses off to the side and keep chugging away. Maybe we'll throw the turbo on next. So I am going to utilize 3 of the 8th MPT ports and 1 of the quarter MPT ports. The quarter MPT port is going to be for the brake booster. Other ones are going to be for the blow-off valve and fuel pressure regulator and whatever else we need to grab boost reference from. So when you buy this manifold, it literally just comes with the manifold and that's it. So when you get ready to order it, you need to bear in mind, hey, there's some things I'm going to need to get coming for this thing. All the fittings we're using are from Vibrant. It also is worth noting that you can get the Corsa Veloce manifold in a forward-facing configuration. So this one's going to be rear-facing because we're using all the accessories, but you can get them in a forward-facing. I'm actually going to take this out. Okay. I do 8th MPT to 4AN on these because putting a straight fitting on with a hose, it's kind of, there's a chance that the hose can get pinched and you won't get a good boost reference. Whereas with this, I can put a 90-degree push lock hose end onto the vacuum line, and that way I know that it's not going to kink. I've got 1 more of these to put in. So yeah, I'm going to use 1 for the blow-off valve, 1 for my fuel pressure regulator, and then I'm going to have another one that is more than likely going to be used for a hob switch. And if I need to, I have 1 additional 8th MPT port that I can grab boost reference from. But I'm pretty sure we are going to use the iWire dual pump hardwire kit for this, and that uses a hob switch. A hob switch is a switch that has a pressure diaphragm in it, and you can buy them rated for different pressures, and it will close a switch when it sees a certain pressure. So for instance, we're probably going to get a 5 psi hob switch for this, so that when the manifold hits 5 psi of pressure, it'll close those contacts and it'll turn on the secondary fuel pump. Because you don't want both fuel pumps running all the time, because you can overheat your fuel, and that's not really a good thing. So I'm not really happy with how this fitting turned out in here, so I'm going to redo this one. Okay, now that we have our fittings in there, I'm going to go back to the parts room. I'm going to grab some 8th MPT push lock 90s, and then I'll get those on there, and then that will make putting the boost lines on extremely easy. I'm going to get all of our AN hose ends here. I'm just going to start these on, and then I'm going to lay the manifold down and make sure that I don't have any clearance issues, which I shouldn't. On there. Okay. Yeah, so we have a ton of space here for our fittings. Nothing's gonna kink our hoses or anything. We'll have good boost reference. And now we can bolt the manifold down. All right, so as mentioned before, we are using a Garrett G30 900 on this. And to keep cylinder pressures down, we have the 1.0 housing on it. So that's going to help with flow and keeping everything happy in the combustion chamber. Man, look at that. Look at that. Okay, let me get this V-band on here. We got the V-band that we were missing. So I'm just gonna set this on here for demonstration, whatnot, because it looks cool. You know, everybody likes to see the turbo on the car. Garrett is the premium. Garrett is what you buy when you really just don't want to spare an expense. But with that comes a price, and obviously they're expensive. But these turbos do perform absolutely phenomenally. This is their G30 900, so they keep their sizing pretty simple to understand. The 900 is obviously the horsepower capabilities of the turbo, and the G30, G25, that is the series of the size of the actual turbo. So we did a G25 660 on Noah's car, and that thing spooled immediately. That was the gray wide body car that I took you for a ride for, Richard. That thing was a rocket ship, a lot of fun. But the power tapers off a little bit on the big end because it's smaller, it's a little bit more restrictive. So for the Garretts, at least, for 600 horsepower, I would do the G30 700, 770, or the 660. Both of those are really solid options. If you're doing a precision, I would say a 6466 or a 6262. Those are both fantastic turbos for around the 600 horsepower range. The important thing to bear in mind is that most turbochargers show up in the mail with the smallest housing available. And if you're going to be running the turbo kind of towards the higher end of its power limitations, you're going to want to step this housing up. We've used a lot of Garretts, we've used a lot of Precisions, and we've used a handful of Pulsar PSR turbos. The PSR is a more budget-friendly option, whereas the Precision and the Garrett are definitely more of a premium product. But all three of them perform phenomenally. We've done a couple FP turbos, and we've done a couple Borg Warners. The Borg Warners are fantastic turbos for road race, but they're extremely expensive. And if you overspin them, they can fail and damage the engine. So I really like Garretts. I really like Precisions. Those are the two that I tend to steer people towards. All right, so we have the turbocharger on. It's obviously going to come back off a couple times just while I fit everything, but we wanted to get a cool picture and, you know, show the setup and everything. We have the intake manifold on and final bolted down. And I need to get the factory throttle body off of the old manifold, so I'm going to get that knocked out real quick. And then I think we're kind of at a stopping point for today. We've got a lot accomplished today. When we started filming this morning, we were on episode 1, and so we got a lot of stuff knocked out. We got a whole long block together now with manifolds, and it's looking primo. We are going to transfer this throttle body over to the new manifold. Okay, now we're going to get these old cooling ports off the throttle body because we're not using them anymore. So just to simplify things a little bit, we're going to yank these out. All right, we're going to get our oil feed banjo fitting put in here so that we can get oil up to the turbo. Sometimes this can be a little challenging depending on which style oil feed line you have. And it looks like this is not going to be any exception. What I'm going to actually have to do is start this nut here and get that tight and make sure that the actual AN portion, flat parts of the fitting are flat with the banjo, because it's going to be a real tight fit. Just like that. I'm going to swing this over here, get that plumbed up to the turbo. I'm just going to loose fit that on there for now. All right. There we have our oil feed line. So In the video, it's all going to be one portion, but right now I'm kind of tied up on stuff. So we're going to clip to when I have the valve covers, and we can make the fuel lines and we can make the breather lines. So, because right now I'm kind of stuck. So this might be tomorrow or the day after. We'll see. But clip to now, or clip to then. Clip to then. Okay, now that we've gotten our valve covers in place, we have a couple things that we need to install onto the engine that actually mount to the valve covers. One of those is the Outfront Motorsports low profile oil fill. So this is going to provide you a lot of extra clearance running your intercooler piping. The ETS kits fit phenomenally, but sometimes it is a little tricky to get to your oil fill cap with the piping that goes right here. So I like throwing these on just to give the engine a little bit more room to work. Things don't chafe. It just, overall, it's a better experience. And I'm also going to get a little bit of oil on this O-ring. These should be available on our website, and they'll fit any EJ car. They all use the exact same bolt spacing on the oil fill, so it doesn't matter if you have a Bug Eye or a 2021, they will all work. So, okay, nice and low profile. It's got its own cap, has an O-ring in it so it's not going to leak. All aluminum, it's good stuff. Okay. Now, let's get our coil packs, which I need to go. This is an OEM Subaru ignition coil pack. They are a fantastic coil pack. They have plenty of power for factory applications. They're reliable, they work well. But what we found in the past with building these cars and making a lot of power is as you go up in horsepower and you need to prevent spark blowout, you have to close the gap on the spark plug. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing for horsepower, but when it comes to daily driving and drivability, when you close the gap, sometimes you can get random misfires, random roughness counts, and we weren't really down with that. So a long time ago, be like 5 years ago, I think, Justin developed these coil packs that are ours, and we've really perfected them now. We have almost no failure rates with them. They have a higher spark output than the factory one. So what that means is you can make a ton of power without having to close your plug gap, so you retain no spark blowout and some more better drivability. So we're going to get these put on and continue on with the build. I'm going to shoot a little dielectric grease in these, but when you order them off our website, it comes with it in it already. Another big benefit to using our coil packs is these have a 18-month hassle-free warranty. So if for any reason one of these does fail on you, all you have to do is hit us up and we'll send you a replacement right away. And we'll also help you diagnose the issue on why it failed, because usually there is always a reason that they fail. Even though we still honor the warranty, we do try to help people in figuring out what caused them to fail as well. Things that can cause them to fail is poor grounding. So if you have an older car, like a 02 to 07, so similar to this car, what I like to do is I like to add an additional ground strap onto the engine, because poor grounding is what eventually will kill these. Because with inferior grounding, you're going to have more amperage going through the coil pack because it's working harder to complete its circuit. So if you get a good ground strap and you have good grounding on your engine, you shouldn't have any coil pack issues. Now that we have that finished, we are going to get to removing these ports on each valve cover, these 4, and we're going to finish off our install on our AN conversion for the breather system. Up close and personal, Richard. All right, so same process here. Just going to take some vice grips and try to flatten out these ports a little bit, and then give them a twist, and they should come right out. Didn't scratch. Second one. There it goes. Okay, now I'll repeat on the other side. Now, on this side, since I have these fuel rails in place and I don't want to risk hitting one of them, what I'm going to do is I have a socket on an extension that will give me some extra room to swing so I don't damage anything. So, okay, so we'll start with the bigger one. Again, we're going to use a little bit of green sleeve retainer. We'll set that in there. And get this one there. Just going to thread this cap on. Oh, I lost one. Just like that. And repeat the same on the other side. Okay, now we are going to finish our breather hoses for the block or crankcase equalization. Now, what that typically looks like is this on the factory configuration. This big messy web of preformed hoses and steel tubes and stuff. We're gonna ditch this whole thing and do an AN conversion. To start that off, we're gonna get this T fitting here, and if you order all the fittings off of our website with this AN breather conversion, it's gonna come with all the fittings that I show you on the install. It's just not going to come with the hoses. The reason that we do that is, as you'll see when I lay this engine out, every one is a little bit different, so it doesn't really make sense for us to charge you for hoses if they're not gonna work for you in the first place. So we just give you the hose or the fittings. We just give you the fittings, let you go grab the hoses. All you need to make sure is that the hoses are petroleum safe. So they cannot be a heater hose, they cannot be a coolant hose. They can be a fuel injection hose, they can be a transmission cooling line hose. It just has to be petroleum rated. With that said, we're gonna get this onto our center block breather port and then make the hoses that go to the center. So I'm gonna get my 8AN wrench in here and tighten this up. These don't need to be killed, they just need to be snug. Okay. Now, on the valve covers, if you order the fittings, you are going to get 2 90-degree fittings and 2 45-degree fittings. The reason we do it like that, give me a second. The reason we do that is so that on the cylinder head here, let me come around to your side, Richard. On the cylinder head, you can have the 45 on the front, and then you can have your 90 on the back, and so it'll clear. I still need to go grab our 90s, but we're gonna put the 45 right here. And this one is actually going to go to our AOS. So we're gonna leave these off with no hoses on it for now, because when we go to do the AOS install, we'll get the hoses routed on the AOS, and then we're going to shove the hose ends onto these, crimp them down, and then it'll be an AN AOS end, if that makes sense. All right, we're gonna start off with our hose here. Now for these fittings, you're gonna need half inch hose. So it needs to be a 1/2 inch petroleum rated hose. I'm gonna get this straight fitting on here. Get that on. And then I'm going to pass it underneath the intake manifold here over to our T-fitting in the middle of the block. And I'm just gonna start threading it on because I'm gonna use this to get our measurement. And then after we get our measurement, I'll cut the hose, slide a couple clamps on it, and then put the other end on. Okay, so that one's snug. Oh, sorry, I'm walking right in front of you. Now we have our 90-degree fitting here. And like I said, we're gonna put the 90-degree one in the back, like so. Now you can see what I mean, where the 45 and the 90 will both fit together, and it's gonna be nice and flush, low mount. The only other really alternative is if you got an extra long 90 and had it come up further, but we don't keep those in stock because they're a little bit more specialized. Now, we'll get this here. I always give it just a little bit of extra room, and I'll actually probably go around this oil line here. Kind of just depends on how I want to sit it. Or we can go in front. I think I'm gonna go in front. So I have my hose measurement there, something like so. So I'm gonna grab my hose cutters. And if you haven't invested in a quality set of hose cutters yet, and you're working on aftermarket cars a lot, I highly recommend it. These ones are from Blue Point. There's the part number. And they make making hoses so simple. Gives a nice clean cut, no frays. And we'll take this fitting off. Come on. And we'll get this off here. A lot of AN stuff on this engine. It's gonna look cool. Now I'm gonna grab a couple of squeeze clamps so that we can have a permanent seal, and then we'll put this hose end on and we'll have one done. I think so. All right, I'm gonna take my 2 squeeze clamps, slide them over the hose, Get this one shoved on, just like that. Not bad, eh? Then, get our squeeze clamps. There you go. Nice and professional. All right, let's go do a final install on this. Snake this down under here. Okay, now I'm gonna grab my AN wrench to make this just a little easier. All right, now I'm just gonna repeat the exact same for this side. Man, this is the second really in-depth build that we've done on our YouTube channel. And the first one just had so much good interaction. I got a ton of views, and we couldn't be more thankful. So if you're liking this one, go ahead, drop us a comment, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Let us know if we should do some more builds like this, because I certainly like doing them. All right, did this one a little backwards, but it's all right. Get this laid over here, and we're gonna need about that much. And I set my hose cutters. Okay. The purpose of these hoses here going to the block is it equalizes the crankcase pressure across the cylinder heads and the center block, because you wouldn't want the crankcase pressure to be higher on one bank than the other. It could make the engine run goofy. You could run into buildup issues and some misfires, other things like that. So what these hoses are for is to give the PCV system a place to equalize itself. So that's basically it. I'm gonna slide these clamps over. See, doesn't that look so nice? It looks way better than the old factory stuff, so looks good. Okay, well, that's that for that portion of the breather system. So I'm gonna tighten these down, and then we can do the fuel lines. At least, well, one fuel line. We have to wait for the other ones until we put the motor in, but we are gonna make the fuel line that transfers fuel from this bank to this bank. If you were using this factory piece, you'd have this big hose that goes up right in front of the turbo, and it would just cloud all that up. Same deal over here. You'd have this big preformed hose that goes up out of the way. It's just, get rid of this, do this, way better. It's also worth noting, if you are going to use this and breather system and an AOS at the same time, you need one more part, and it's from 3MI, and it's a AOS drain hose. I have one on the way right now. I don't have one in stock for the video, but we are going to be putting one on this car. What that does is it redirects the oil drain for your AOS to the turbo drain instead of the block breather. Because if you come around over here, Richard, you can see that our block breather is now AN converted as well. So there's not really a solid, clean way to use this as crankcase ventilation and a drain back with the AN conversion. So what that 3MI hose does is it intercepts, it puts a Y on the turbo drain from the turbo down here, and it puts an extra hose onto it so that the AOS can drain alongside the turbo. So it works a lot better that way. I am going to put the power steering pump on. I have the lines broken open because we are going to be doing a chase bays power steering kit on this car. Typically, when I take a motor out of a Subaru, I try to keep the power steering system intact. So I'll just unbolt the pump and kind of lay it off to the side. But on this one, we're doing a nice tucked power steering kit. So it's so nice that all the components are so fresh. Like everything looks so good. The alternator on. I'm going to make this fuel transfer hose. For this, we are going to be using Vibrant PTFE fittings. It makes assembling the hoses really easy, and I'm going to show you how. So you have to make sure that everything matches. So we have Vibrant fittings, we have Vibrant hose. And building these hoses is extremely simple. So we need to get all this tape and stuff off here. So the first step is you're going to undo the hose end portion of your fitting, And inside, there's going to be a little lock collar. This guy. This is what's going to do all the crimping. So we're going to set this over here, out of the way for now. First things first is to take the bottom portion of the hose end, put it onto the hose. Want to make sure that's on there before you do any of the next. Then, what I like to do is take a little pocket screwdriver and just kind of give a little bit of a gap between the outer braided steel liner and the PTFE liner. Just kind of wiggle it like that a little bit, because the next step is taking this insert and you're going to pass it in between the braided portion and the PTFE portion. Just like so. And you're going to want to get that PTFE all the way up to this very bottom lip. So sometimes I just kind of tap it on the toolbox. That usually does the trick. Okay. Now we got that on there. It's all the way up to the bottom lip, or the top lip, I guess. And then you take your hose end, you just kind of shove it in inside the PTFE liner, like so. And you slide this collar up, thread it on, and you have your hose end. It's that simple. It's really, really easy. I'm going to pass this hose underneath the intake manifold. All right, then, if you come over here, Richard, you can see I already have this hose end on. So all I'm gonna do when I cut this is I'm gonna take it to where I think it's gonna be, and then I'm gonna add about an inch. Just because by the time you make the hose end, if you try to make it exactly the perfect length, almost every time it's a little bit too short. So I always add about an inch to it just to be safe. To do that, we're gonna use a cutoff wheel. And we'll get our safety squints on. Now, if you look inside this hose mount, there's debris in there, okay? So it's very, very important that after you cut a hose with the cutoff wheel, you blow gun it out or run some ethanol or some fuel through it, something. Just make sure that you flush that stuff out, or else it's gonna end up in your injector pre-filters. There we go, clean. All right, now let's put the other hose end on. Again, we're just gonna take this little collar here, slide it on top of the PTFE, and give it a couple love taps. There we go. Okay, now, from where I cut it, there's a little bit of extra material here that got frayed. What you can do is just take a screwdriver and just try to kind of smooth that over with the round portion of a screwdriver. And this should slide right in. Okay. Now we're gonna get this over here. Now that I got that one started, I can go in here and finish tightening this down. The reason I left it loose until I got it on the engine is just so that I can be sure that I have the rotation that I want, so that the hose isn't bound up or binding when I go to put it onto the actual fuel rail. You can tighten these down. Just making sure that that hose isn't kinking or causing any interruptions anywhere. All right, now we have a fuel transfer hose. So when we get the engine set in, we'll make one more hose. Well, we'll make a handful of more hoses, but we'll make another hose that goes from the driver's side strut tower, from out of the filter, and it'll come over here to this side rail. This will transfer fuel over to this side, and then out of here, we'll go over to our fuel pressure regulator. So again, we'll do all of that after the engine's actually set in the car. All right, now that we have that set on, we can get our alternator put on. Being very careful against the aluminum there on the intake manifold. All right, now that's on. Now I'm gonna go grab our aluminum pulley cover. All right, here we have our OTL brushed raw aluminum pulley cover. We only have a couple of these in stock right now. I think we had 2 more left back there. So if you're seeing this in the video and you want one, go check our website quick because they might sell out by the time you get there. All our pulley cover, we are going to get this piece put on here. And then we have the other standoff right here. These can just be hand tight. And then we'll put our pulley cover right here. Oh yeah. Okay, so our long block is assembled. It is ready to get put into the car. So that's gonna be the end of today's video. On the next one, we're gonna do our clutch install, get that all put together. We're gonna slap this motor in, and then we're gonna do our axles, our drivetrain, and a couple other chassis prep things before we really shove some power at this thing. So if you like today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment on what you think, and turn that notification bell on so you can get notified when we post the next one. See you then.